Hello, everybody. Yes, it is me, CJ, aka Mr. TNTBS. And yes, we are live right here on Facebook. And this is the first show live for this year of 2022. And I thank you for joining me. And this needs to be said, Elephant Exposed. And I am very excited today about a topic that just stood out to me, basically. My intentions, I was going to really be talking about the First Amendment and the protections and things that it gives. But as I begin to venture on and just researching on different topics, I ended up getting my eye caught on a very interesting topic, I think, because personally, this particular topic has always been a pet peeve of mine. And that's just simply because of the way that I was raised and brought up in my home. And where in the fashion that I was brought up, some people would say it's strict or hard or whatever, but that's pretty much anybody describing their upbringing, because of course, when you are young-minded, it seems like the whole world is just trying to hold you down and keep you from being great, to keep you from doing all the things that, you see grown people do and so forth. So I get that. But everything has its place, guys. And I truly do believe that. So before I get into my topic, my subject for today, I do want to put this disclaimer out there. Before I put up any images or share any videos or any of those things, I'm going to warn you guys that the images that I put up, number one, are not mine. They are shared images that you can just pull off the internet. Not even on a particular search engine or anything like that. But it's to help illustrate and bring my thoughts to you. It's to help better illustrate that for my audience. So in my mind, I was like, well, I can go ahead and do the First Amendment any given time. It's just like everything else. It's in black and white. It's almost like the run of the mill. But like I said, this year I wanted to just ping on different kinds of topics. And like I said, for this particular topic, I'm extremely interested in, because this is one of those things that really gets me to my core today. And I don't have to be related to you, even though I speak with my son and my children and people that's within my inner circle about it. I express myself out loud. And people are more image aware than what they are like to realize. It's just, I believe that it's a lack of knowing how and where these images and stuff come from and what these images really symbolize. So with that being said, I'm going to start out with a little something like this, kind of get you warmed up a little bit as to about what we're going to be talking about here. Okay. All right. So my first image here, guys, obviously, is we're talking about sagging. We're talking about sagging. I'm not really interested in about the jeans themselves or the shorts themselves, but just looking at that image alone, it sends multiple messages, and not necessarily negative ones in the sense of like violence and stuff or something like that. Now, some people may think that, but if you are someone like myself, like I said, that grew up in the fashion that I did, you know, I was born in the 70s, and all of my rearing years are obviously in the 80s. So my view on things like this is I kind of like just hold my head down in shame, kind of like on the behalf of the individuals that do things like this. Now, granted, we live in a free country. And what do I mean by that? Well, just like I was going to break down the First Amendments and all of its protections and so forth and things like this, this kind of plays into the First Amendment. So in a sense, we still are kind of touching on the First Amendment. Why? Because this is freedom of expression. Granted, not all freedom of expression is, let's just say, flattering. So I say, okay, well, this image grabbed my attention, and I was like, well, let's talk about this elephant, because obviously we have a lot of these elephants all in and around our society, and they are not always Black people either. Even though my image up here is two particular Black individuals, or two people of dark skin. We just assume that they're Black because we're looking at dark skin. We're looking at sagging, which also they kind of fall into the stereotype of the young Black male. And so even myself, just a second, I just realized that I just went right into the stereotype and just assuming that these two individuals are Black. And that's what happens. That's where it's at. Because the majority of society, you know, without just it's almost the same parallel that Whoopi Goldberg was using whenever before she was educated and before I was even educated and the rest of the world was educated, as to have you have more of a color hue for Jews just like you have Africans, everybody else. So now I said all of that. My research began, but not with this particular image. This second image I'm going to share with you guys is where I begin to say, okay, what is this? What is the message? What are we trying to say to our young men, and particularly our young Black men? And so as I began to look at this post here, and of course you have the image. Now this really is of a young Black man, but the posting that's on it says, sagging started in slavery, when the homosexual slave master would rape young Black slaves. It's called buck breaking. You were forced to wear your pants below your waist, so other homosexual slave owners would know that you were already butt I'm sorry, buck broken. That truly was a slip. Please forgive me, because I'm also aware of the, for lack of a better phrase right now, we'll say the urban legends that kind of centers around this. And here's the thing, guys. Whether this is urban legend based, whether this is conspiracy based, whether this is, oh, this is just talk around the fire camp based, any other kind of way you want to say this, I really don't care. Because here's the thing. It still boils down to image. And this is the way that I had a crash course on image. So my mother breaks it down to me like this. People, for the most part, will treat you the way that you look and carry yourself. Mystery solved, right? For the most part. Okay. So with that being said, if I am looking the part, I'm feeling the part, I'm acting out the part, and for the most part, that's the way people will hopefully react to me. If I am looking to be treated as a young, educated, promising, successful young man, I want to project that image. So even before you hear me speak, I want you to see me. And in your view of me, of the adjectives that I just gave you, I want for those words, those descriptive words, to line up to what you're looking at. So we live in a society that has kind of already laid out the footprints, if you will, as to what those adjectives look like. Okay? And when we think about it, we kind of get this picture of maybe not necessarily a suit and tie, but nowadays they call it business casual. So I picture in my head maybe, you know, a nice polo, maybe some slacks, and, you know, matching loafers of some sort, something like that. It doesn't, like, you don't have to look necessarily dress like you're going to a church service, but I don't picture an image of shirt, no shirt, showing my underwear, pants around my waist. So as I began to do a little bit of searching on the internet, and it happened to take up most of my day today because the images and the stories and stuff, they just became so interesting to me. And of course, you know, with everything else, when you do things like this, you come to find out that when you are really trying to fact check something or look at the truths and things, and especially when it's a harsh truth, when it's a hard truth, it's going. I've come to find out that it's going to be flooded with distractions and conspiracy and everything, because it really was never meant to be uncovered. And so I just took the word itself, the two words, buck broken, and I put it in my Google search, and all these wonderful, lovely pictures begin to pop up. And it began to tell the story what buck breaking really was. And actually, this is a very decent picture, I think, as to how or really was. This is obviously an illustration of a white slave master, homosexual slave master, and he has this black male slave that is bent over, stretched out, vulnerable, and completely naked and exposed to friends, family, loved ones, or even people that are probably inspired by, no doubt, this black man's strength, prowess, different things like this. And just like the word says, the homosexual slave master will begin to, now according to what I read, that the term is called flogging, and that term flogging became very familiar to me because I came from the Navy side of the house, and for those who are familiar with naval terms, we recognize flogging as a particular kind of whip that was used back in the day to beat people with for punishment. So I automatically connected that right away, and I was like, oh wow. But that just wasn't it. Not only would they flog these guys, the whole purpose of the flogging was to tenderize, literally tenderize the black man's backside to the point to where he could no longer even have a natural defense to tighten up from what was just about ready to follow, and that is the actual sexual assault, commonly called sodomy, rear end raping. And this is a very difficult, this part is very, very difficult for me, because in order to know how to stop something, you gotta know where it began. Now, myth versus fact. I'm gonna put a pin right before I'm about to share with you the heartbreak of this particular thing. Ladies and gentlemen, I would submit to you that if it had not been for people like my mother and generations before her saying phrases like, there's nothing new under the sun, I took that lightly because I really did not truly understand what she meant. As a matter of fact, in my mind, it became almost like a cliche. I had no clue as to just how in depth she was talking. Now, you do have some conspirators out there that would take the same images and take the same stories that I'm telling you now, and they try to make it a black versus white thing. This is not it. Or they'll take this story, or my subject rather, or this subject rather, and then they'll try to say, CJ, Mr. TNTBS is attacking members of the gay community. No, ma'am, no, sir, and any other pronoun you are relating to. No, this is about learning where things come from, and then you're making a sound, educated decision to either perpetuate that cycle or to cut it off. So these events would take place in front of children, and they were forced to watch. So not only were these buck breaking events just happening, and the thing about it was that normally punishments and things, or at least it's written this way, punishments came about when there was violation of the law. But what made a buck break event so unique in its own right, so to speak, or in its own era, was that it was a very slick way for white slave masters, slave owners, slave traders to be gay out loud in an era where that was even a shame for them. So here's another depiction of possibly a wife, a mother, even a baby sister. You can assume that. I won't particularly leave this one up because it shows a little bit more skin, and I know how sensitive, my crowd may be. But this is just to give you like I said, to bring it home to you. These are just an illustration, which means that this could have happened like this, or it could not have happened, whatever the case may be. But this is the one thing that we do know. One thing that we do know, and it is recorded, and it cannot lie, and it cannot be lied upon, exaggerated, or centered around a conspiracy, is this right here. All of these events and more happened because there were actual farms just for buck breaking. Let's read it a little bit. It said buck breaking, the process where black men were routinely, get that, routinely raped by their gay slave owners. And I asked the question, did you know during slavery in the U.S., gay white slave owners would break, I'm sorry, I can't read that because the slogan is over it, slaves, in order to force them into homosexual acts? The buck's male child were required to watch front row, so he too can witness his father's sexual demise and humiliation. The slave master would savagely sodomize the buck, aka the aka defiant male slave, and in front of his wife, family, friends, and children. Buck breaking was the slave master's very effective tool to keep all young black slaves from ever defiant and taking revenge. Now, what does that have to do with this? It's called learned behavior. Number one, these were very true. And where they were written into history, they were got rid of. But like I said, buried so deep in conspiracies, and basically he who controls the education controls the narrative. So it's kind of like us listening to our children, and they're trying to tell us the truth, and they're got tears in their eyes, and they're like, "Mama, Daddy, that happened," but we are just so grown, and we are so into whatever we got going on. We're not listening to our children saying, "This really did happen," and then come to find out that something actually did, and your child was trying to tell you, and then you have to come back to your child and be like, "Child, I'm so sorry. You were right. I should have paid attention." This is my rendition of that. So what does it have to do with sagging of today? Well, it's about the symbology. I would like to think, in my mind's eye, that if you and or your loved ones are just sheepishly, continually falling for the same following trends, aka styles, aka what's in, all of that, at least know what you're following. First Amendment, you have the freedom to do whatever you want to do, but the caveat should have been bigger than the actual amendment itself. And here's the caveat: this is how people get in trouble. This is how people get arrested. This is how people find themselves in fines and different things like that, or highly inconvenienced for about 24 to 48 hours, because now we have to identify you by state law, and all states aren't the same, and so forth and everything like this. When you are exercising your right to express yourself, when you are exercising your right to talk, and then it touches programs like mine, press, media. When you are violating someone else's right while engaging in yours, then it no longer becomes your right anymore. So there are guidelines. There are limits. There are mitigating circumstances around even, yes, me expressing myself. As a part of media, I wanted to be careful of the images that I put on my show, because I know eventually someone would probably see one of these images and find it very disturbing and offensive and so forth. And before they hear the context around me sharing these images and why, they would report me, they'll report the show the images, and just say, "I'm offended, I'm offended, I'm offended," but without any other kind of understanding. This particular subject happened to be one of my pet peeves. I really do not care for my young black men, my young black kings, my young black brothers, to portray themselves like that. And half the time when I do talk to some of them, and yes, all in my family, mostly that I do the direct talking to like this, And I asked them, what are you doing? Do you want to be treated the way you look? I ain't looking like nothing. This just my swag. This is just what I... Okay, how many people speak your language right now? How many other people understand that this is your swag? Or let's just say we understand, you know, that this is your swag, but you know that you are also sending other multiple messages. For those that are woke, for those that are educated, for those of us that are not so woke and not so educated. Don't you know that more than just one type of mindset is seeing you and perceiving you, not necessarily in a cool light. Do you even know where all this stuff even started? It was not a compliment. It was nothing cool and pretty about it. And for those that have a very venturous sexual mind, this was not something that you would be wanting to pleasure yourself to off in a corner somewhere. I believe the closest modern day imagery that kind of put this in perspective is that if you are familiar with an older movie called Pulp Fiction, starring John Travolta, Samuel L. Jackson, there was a scene where Vin Rhames became violated. That was a very close depiction as to what buck breaking was. And it was not a fantasy thing. It was not a thing to where the watchers would be sitting around pleasuring themselves looking at. This stuff was horrible. So much to where the effects of these buck breaking events, many of these males did not even survive. And I'm putting that very lightly. The elephant exposed behind that is that many of them was not like we had read before in the other picture. This was a repeated thing. And just like how you would break a horse's spirit or a bull spirit, that's what this was. It was more than just the raping of the individual. It was the raping of the mind and of the spirit these men carried. You see, that's what rape really is to break the individual down. But tonight we're keeping it on the male, but that's what rape is, period, for both male and female. It's not so much of the sexual act itself, because you got people that engage in sodomy and so forth, and so therefore we know that the act itself is slightly different. But when it's done in the sense of taking away your power, your strength, your standing, what you represent, then it becomes a power tool. And that's what it was used for. And so when I see this, and especially, God, it kills me to see an older man do this. And I would like to think, oh, he's just one of those young old men where he probably feel like, well, this is what the young kids do. I'm hoping that he's thinking like that. But even with that, it just blows my mind. Because I'm like, really? It's one thing for the youth to do it because they still got some learning and growing to do. But then for you, grown man, what are you really trying to say? Guys, this platform is about educating ourselves, each one teach one, and exposing injustices. And I do believe that this is one of our biggest injustices. Are we so afraid of the LGBTQIA community? Are we so afraid of, over hypersensitive people to where we just won't say enough is enough? Have we gotten that far gone? I would like to think not. But who am I? I'm just a podcaster. The only thing I can do is just share my thoughts with you. And hopefully we agree on some things. So, things like this imagery, this symbology goes a lot deeper than what most people would even care to even look into. But please understand that there's nothing new under the sun. Nothing. And what we are experiencing are the same repeated things. It's just a different face, and it looks a little different because we have technology and we give it a different name. And some of these things don't need to be repeated at all. So with that being said, guys, I'm gonna lay that out there. I'm done with my slides. And if you feel like this show was of benefit to you, I appreciate it if you let me know by hitting me up in the comments. So even if you didn't like it, hey CJ, Mr. TNTBS, you think you so deep or whatever. If you got anything to say, be it positive or negative, I want to hear. I invite you. And if you feel like you have something that can prove or be disproved, not only on this particular show, but any other show that I put out there, I invite it all. And to all my Ellie watchers out there, I thank you for joining me. I thank you for your support. I thank you for the compliments and the encouragement to keep on doing this show. It really means a lot to me, and I will keep giving it as long as you are willing to watch. Thank you so much, y'all. With that being said, I'm out of here. Y'all have a good evening. Good night.